Welcome and thank you for standing by. Your lines have been placed on listen-only mode. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'll turn the call over to Marla Blahnik. You may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all, and welcome to this virtual meeting of the Community Development Advisory Board, the Advisory Committee to the U.S. Department of Treasury's Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, or CDFI Fund. Also want to apologize for starting late. We were going through some technical difficulties, but we've resolved it and are very excited to start this meeting with you all today. My name is Marla Blahnik. I'm the chair of the Advisory Board. I'd like to extend a special welcome to the Advisory Board members, especially the new members that have joined the board since our last meeting. Wizipan Garyat is the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, Indian Affairs at the Department of the Interior, and Mia Pittman, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Risk Management and Regulatory Affairs with the Federal Housing Administration at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Ms. Pittman is replacing Arthur Jemison, who was HUD designee the last time that we met. And Mia is not able to join us today, but will join us for future meetings. I'd also like to welcome the members of the public who are joining us online. Thank you for your interest in the work of the CDFI Fund. This is a particularly important time for the Advisory Board to be engaged. On the heels of unprecedented investments by the CDFI Fund into CDFIs, including $1.75 billion for the CDFI Equitable Recovery Program, and from the Treasury Department, nearly $10 billion for the State Small Business Credit Initiative, and over $11 billion via its Emergency Capital Investment Program, or ECIP. The CDFI Fund is at a critical juncture. The CDFI certification process is being revamped as the CDFI Fund processes significant input that was collected through their request for information. Rising interest rates are influencing the cost of capital, pricing many Americans further out of the traditional banking system. Homeownership continues to be a challenge as many parts of the country are still coming down from the inflated housing costs we saw during the pandemic. Small businesses are rebounding from COVID-related adjustments to their business models and from maxing out their credit lines to survive. The CDFI industry has never been more relevant or more needed. Today, you will hear from Director Jody Harris with updates from the CDFI Fund, as well as comments regarding upcoming changes to the CDFI certification process. You will also hear more about how the board is working to advance our mandate through two active subcommittees that will focus broadly on underserved communities and geographies, as well as tools to increase CDFI's efficiency and scale our impact. Before we begin the roll call, I would like to provide an update on a few of our members. Since our last meeting, 3 members have left the positions which qualified them to be on this advisory board, and thus they are no longer serving. Luis Pastor, Jennifer Sun, and Alan Tian. Justin Maxson has also left his position at the Department of Agriculture, Rural Development. CDFI Fund staff are currently working with the Treasury Department, USDA, and the White House on replacing these members. I want to offer my sincere thanks for their service to this body. I would also like to announce that President Biden recently appointed Ms. Seema Agnani to the Advisory Board. Ms. Agnani is the Executive Director of the National Coalition for Asian Pacific American Community Development, or National Capacity. She is replacing Jennifer Sun and fills the National Consumer or Public Interest Representative slot for this advisory board. Seema is currently traveling and could not join us today. We will welcome her and swear her in at our next meeting. And now I would like to formally begin the meeting with the roll call of the advisory board. As I call your name, please respond present. Dennis Albord.
Present.
Wizipan Garyat. David Glazer.
Present.
Patrick Kelly. Patrice Kunesh. I know that Patrice is on the call, so Harold Pettigrew.
Present.
And Mia Pittman, as I mentioned, is unable to join today. We also have Graham Steele, who I don't know if he's on yet. He was to be joining late, so he will join us later. Michael Swack.
Present.
And Darren Williams.
Present.
Having a quorum, I will call this meeting of the Community Development Advisory Board to order. I'd like to now call upon the two newest members of the Advisory Board to provide a brief introduction of yourself. And in this case, it will just be Mr. Garriott because Mia Pittman is not able to join us today. So, Mr. Garriott, would you please start us off? Or is he not on? Okay, we'll skip ahead. I'd also like the other members to introduce themselves so the public watching know who you are. Dennis Alvord.
Good afternoon. My name is Dennis Alvord. I serve as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Economic Development and the Chief Operating Officer at the U.S. Economic Development Administration, which is a bureau within the U.S. Department of Commerce.
Thank you, Dennis. David Glazer.
My name is Dave Glazer. I'm the president of MoFi, a CDFI headquartered in Montana that serves the Northern Rockies.
Thank you, Dave. I don't believe Patrick Kelly is on the line. Patrick? We'll jump ahead to Patrice Kunesh.
Good afternoon, Patrice Kunesh. I'm the director of Pehin Haha Consulting, and I work with the Native American Rights Fund. I represent the Native communities on the Community Advisory Board.
Thank you, Patrice. Harold Pettigrew.
Hi, hello everyone. Harold Pettigrew, CEO for WACIF, the Washington Area Community Investment Fund, serving small businesses throughout the Washington, D.C. metropolitan region.
Thanks, Harold. Graham Steele, have you joined us? I'll pass it to Michael Swack.
Yeah, hi, I'm Michael Swack. I'm director of the Center for Impact Finance at the Carsey School at the University of New Hampshire.
Thank you, Michael. And last but certainly not least, Darren Williams.
Hi, thank you, Marla. I'm Darren Williams, CEO of Southern Bank Corp. We're a family of three CDFIs, a bank holding company, a bank, and a nonprofit loan fund, $2.5 billion in assets, 56 locations throughout Arkansas and Mississippi.
Excellent. Thank you, Darren. Well, thank you all for being here today. I would like to provide a brief overview of today's agenda. Members of the viewing public can find the agenda at www.cdfifund.gov/CDAB. Next, we will hear from CDFI Fund Director Jody Harris, who will provide her director's report on the activities of the CDFI Fund. Then Director Harris will provide an update on the CDFI Fund's effort to revise CDFI certification criteria and the application. I will then introduce two new subcommittees that we are officially launching today, and we will hear briefly from the chair of each of these new subcommittees. We will then move to the election of a vice chair of the advisory board. This is a new role within the advisory board. And finally, we will address any closing business and conclude the meeting. I would now like to invite CDFI Fund Director Jody Harris to deliver her report. Jody?
Thanks, Marla. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to first begin by reflecting on the last few years, which has been exceptional for all of us. The COVID-19 pandemic's impacts are numerous: lives lost, families impacted, businesses shuttered, the scale of which is unprecedented in our country's history. And we who work in community development finance know that those impacts often run deeper and last longer in low-income, economically distressed communities that we serve, often impacting generations to come. As our country continues to push to move the pandemic to an endemic stage and continue to build upon its efforts to recover from the economic impacts of the pandemic, let us keep front and center the importance of certified community development financial institutions. These CDFIs have been on the front lines responding to the needs of this nation's low-income, low-wealth, economically distressed communities before the pandemic and oftentimes for decades. It was in recognition of this work and their impressive record of accomplishment that the Congress appropriated an additional $3 billion to the CDFI fund to support the critically important work of CDFIs helping rebuild these communities. In fact, since the start of the pandemic, initial reporting shows that CDFI Rapid Response Program and financial assistance recipients combined have reported lending or investing more than $90 billion. However, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let me start with a quick overview and a look at our key accomplishments for fiscal year 2022. Since inception in 1994 and through this morning's CDFI Program and Native American CDFI Program Financial Assistance Award announcement, the CDFI Fund has provided nearly $5.7 billion through a variety of monetary award programs, $71 billion in tax credits through the New Markets Tax Credit Program, and has guaranteed more than $2.1 billion in bonds through the CDFI Bond Guarantee Program, all to increase the impact of CDFIs and other community development organizations in economically distressed and underserved communities. During this time, the CDFI Fund has helped build the capacity of nearly 1,400 certified CDFIs, which are all located in 50 states as well as the District of Columbia, Guam, and Puerto Rico. CDFI Fund award recipients have successfully leveraged billions in private sector investment to create jobs, build affordable housing, build essential community facilities, provide financial counseling, and invest in neighborhood revitalization initiatives, all in economically underserved communities lacking access to traditional lending or banking institutions. In fiscal year 2022, requests for the CDFI Fund's awards continue to exceed the supply of resources for almost every one of our programs, demonstrating strong applicant demand. In fact, this year, more than 40% of all certified CDFIs applied for financial assistance or technical assistance funding, making it the largest number of organizations ever to apply to a single round of the CDFI program and NACA program. The increased resources the CDFI Fund received in fiscal year 2022 enabled us to make the largest awards under two of our programs. In June, we announced over $336.4 million in awards under the Capital Magnet Fund, almost double the amount of awards announced last year. In September, we also announced the approval of $355 million in bond issuances, the largest ever under the CDFI Bond Guarantee Program. In addition to administering our suite of programs, the CDFI Fund also advanced several key administrative and program initiatives to maximize its impact, efficiency, and accessibility this year. These included opening the funding round for the CDFI Equitable Recovery Program, CDFI ERP, authorized by the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, which will provide $1.75 billion in grants to CDFIs to support the lending and investing activities of low and moderate income communities disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The program also enables CDFIs to build capacity by acquiring technology, staff, and other tools necessary to plan and execute the activities under a CDFI ERP award. Earlier this month, we announced that 696 CDFIs from across the country requested a total of $7.69 billion in awards, which is nearly 4 times the amount of available funding. More on this program in a few minutes. We also launched the New Markets Tax Credit Native Initiative, which is an effort to increase New Markets Tax Credit investment in Native areas. This initiative includes a review of existing community and economic development research related to New Markets Tax Credit Native areas and the administration of a survey to participants in past New Market Tax Credit investments in Native areas. The research and survey findings will be used to develop a self-assessment guide, case studies, and training materials for the technical workshops. We have already held 2 of these technical workshops, which were targeted to community development entities that are Native-owned or controlled, Native CDFIs, and other tribal entities that focus on investing in Native New Markets Tax Credit areas. These technical workshops were held in Denver in September and just last week in Phoenix. We are also advancing our efforts to revise the CDFI certification application and annual certification and data collection report, as well as updating our methods for collecting transactional level data from certified CDFIs. I will provide more detail on that important effort in the next segment of our meeting. But to get the full picture, please take a moment to review the CDFI Fund's Fiscal 2022 Agency Financial Report on our website. It provides program-by-program data on the CDFI Fund's activities, as well as the collective impact on communities that lack accessible and affordable financial products and services. And as I mentioned in my recent message to our stakeholders, the reward for the work well done is more work. No one is more familiar with that than the team at the CDFI Fund. In charting out this coming year, it begins in much of the way as 2022 ended, with a flurry of activity and more work to come over the next few months. Let me highlight where we are with some programs. Our Bank Enterprise Award Program, or BA program, awards were provided under the fiscal 21 round of the BA program in April 2022. Since that time, the CDFI Fund has solicited comments on an updated program application. We're in the final steps of completing this process. The next round of the program will open before spring of this year and will combine fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23 funding into a single application round. Be on the lookout in the near future for a blog post on our website helping CDFIs and non-CDFI FDIC-insured institutions prepare potential applications. CDFI Magnet Fund. The fiscal year 2023 round of the Capital Magnet Fund program opened January 18, 2023. The deadline for organizations to submit their SF-424 was last Thursday, February 23rd, and the deadline to submit Capital Magnet Fund applications is March 21st, 2023. Some key changes were made to this round of the Capital Magnet Fund program to provide better opportunity for applicants to address affordable housing needs and were detailed in the application opening announcement. Awards will be announced in fall of 2023. The CDFI Fund is contemplating additional Capital Magnet Fund changes, and in the spring, will request information and feedback on further modifications to the Capital Magnet Fund requirements and policies. The CDFI Bond Guarantee Program, or BG program. The BG program application round for the 2023 year will open later this spring. Of note, of the more than $2.1 billion in bonds that have been guaranteed, participating CDFIs have already deployed approximately $1.4 billion in loans. For our CDFI ERP, or Equitable Recovery Program, as I mentioned earlier, we had over 690 CDFIs request nearly $8 billion in CDFI ERP awards, which is nearly 4.4 times the level of available funding. The CDFI Fund will announce the ERP award recipients by this coming spring. Over the summer, the CDFI Fund requested information on criteria used to designate minority lending institutions, or MLIs. We received a total of 25 comments in response to this request. The CDFI Fund is in the process of reviewing those comments to formulate MLI designation criteria. For the Community Development Financial Institutions Program, or CDFI program, I would like to say a big congratulations to the fiscal 2022 FA Award recipients that were announced this morning. Moving forward, while the exact date for opening the next round has not been set, it will be in fall of 23 and will combine fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24 funding in a single application round for the CDFI program and the native CDFI program. This timeline will provide us the opportunity to solicit public feedback on the FA and TA applications, as well as the evaluation process. A request for comment will be published in the Federal Register in the next few weeks. For our New Markets Tax Credit Program, the calendar year 22 round of the program opened on November 18, 2022. Applications were due on January 26 of 2023. A total of $5 billion in New Markets Tax Credit allocation is available for award, and those awards will be announced in the fall of this year. Lastly, we have the Small Dollar Loan Program. Our 22 Small Dollar Loan Program awards were announced in September, and the third round of the program will open in the fall of this year and will be a combined fiscal 23 and fiscal 24 funding round. I'll also mention that we are in the midst of finalizing the next strategic plan for the CDFI Fund, which will cover from 2023 to 2026. I want to thank the advisory board members for your input on this important planning document. So I know this was a lot, and this information will be made available, and it's also currently on our website, but I do hope it provided an outline of what the CDFI Fund is currently working on and what to anticipate over the next several months. The CDFI Fund will continue providing updates on a program-by-program basis, so please make sure you're signed up for our Gov Delivery service to ensure that you receive those timely updates. You can find a link to the email service at the top right corner of our website. And I'll also add, as you all may know by now, at the end of April 23, I will be leaving my post as director of the CDFI Fund and returning to my hometown of Philadelphia to serve as the president of the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation, or PIDC. I've been with the U.S. Department of Treasury for 15 years, and all of it has been spent working in or with the CDFI Fund team. And as director for the last 4 years, it has been such an honor to be able to work on policy and solutions to meet the credit and capital needs of our most underserved communities. But I'm most honored by the fact that I've been able to serve along a group of people whose dedication to the mission of the CDFI Fund makes it one of the best places to be in the federal government. And I don't say that lightly. I've spent my professional treasury home career here, and it's really a stellar group of people who do a stellar amount of work. The activities and accomplishments I've outlined in this director's report would not be possible if it was not for their hard work, dedicated service, and the professionalism. The staff has supported the greatest expansion of CDFI resources in history. We've regrouped after the longest government shutdown of record to find ourselves front and center in the government's efforts to support our communities through a global pandemic. We've administered $3 billion in grant funding, the highest single appropriation to date. And we've continued to redesign the core of the CDFI Fund, the Community Development Financial Institution Certification process. All of this while continuing to administer programs and manage operations that enable the work of the nationwide CDFI network. I'm forever grateful to you all. I'm so thankful I've had the opportunity to work with you, and I've enjoyed my time of working with this particular Community Development Advisory Board. Thank you for everything. Marla, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Director Harris. I also wanted to take a quick opportunity to welcome Graham Steele, who has joined us since I was last online. So moving on to the next segment of our meeting, the advisory board is statutorily mandated, and its purpose is to provide advice to the director of the CDFI Fund on the policies of the CDFI Fund regarding activities outlined under its authorizing statute. One way we do that is through the formation of subcommittees. Today, we formally begin the work of 2 new subcommittees, and we will hear from the chairs of each, who will provide a high-level description of their subcommittee focus. I'd like to call upon Darren Williams, Chair of the Equitable Prosperity of People and Places Subcommittee. Darren.
Thank you, Marla. I appreciate that. And first, let me say to Director Harris, thank you for your leadership. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and good luck in your next endeavor. So I want to thank Marla for inviting me to chair this exciting subcommittee. It's the Equitable Prosperity of People and Places Subcommittee. This subcommittee will explore what the CDFI Fund can do, what we can do through the CDFI Fund to ensure that its policies and programs support equitable prosperity of people and places, which can include, but it's not limited to, racial and ethnic minority groups, Native communities, rural areas, and persistent poverty communities. Southern Bancorp has 56 locations throughout many of these communities. 55% of our branches are in persistent poor communities. 41% are in communities with less than 25,000 people, and some of our branches are in markets where we're the only bank in town. This is near and dear to our heart. It's literally why Southern was founded, so I'm excited about the work and look forward to working with the committee to move this committee forward. Starting with me on this committee, of course, is our chair, Marla Lonick, Dennis Alvord, Harold Pettigrew, Patrice Ganesh, and Wizapan Garriott. And so I am looking forward to us getting started. and we'll be back in touch about dates and times for our first meeting. Thank you, Marla.
My pleasure. I'd like to now call upon Dave Glazer, Chair of the Tools to Support CDFIs into the Future Subcommittee.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time. And Director Harris, thank you so much for your service. Best of luck. I will be chairing the Tools to Support CDFIs into the Future Subcommittee. And this subcommittee will be evaluating things such as liquidity, technology, artificial intelligence, and other tools that both the CDFI Fund and subsequently its member CDFIs might need access to in order to achieve our collective missions across the United States. Serving with me on the committee include Darren Williams, Mia Pittman, myself, Harold Pettigrew, and Michael Swack. We look forward to getting started. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And just to clarify sort of the next steps with the committees, we have a planning meeting scheduled for March 6th, which will include myself, Darren, Dave, and CDFI Fund and Treasury staff. This will be followed by the convening of the first meeting of each subcommittee later in March. I would like to thank the subcommittee members and especially Chairs Darren Williams and Dave Glazer. We look forward to hearing from you at our next public meeting of the full advisory board in a few months. And I'm going to actually now hand it back to Jody, who's going to speak about updates to the CDFI certification process. So Jody, back to you.
Thanks, Marla. And apologies to everyone if they've been following along on their agenda, and this seems a little out of order, but we're going to take a little bit of time to talk about the CDFI certification application. And it's actually important to note, following the introduction of our subcommittees on this advisory board, that we engaged the last advisory board on subcommittee about certification. So this is actually kind of a culmination of work over a number of years where we're getting closer and closer to the finish line. CDFI certification is a core of what the CDFI Fund does. We are responsible for certifying CDFIs in accordance with the statutory requirements that are outlined in the REGAL Act. And for most of our programs, CDFI certification is required. And through the certification process, we verify that an organization meets the certification requirements through a series of validations and tests in the application. We use a standard application form to collect information and data, and this is all submitted through our AMIT system, our Awards Management Information System, which is necessary to make a certification determination. And CDFIs are required to confirm that they meet these certification requirements on an annual basis, as well as report on their yearly lending and investment activity through the Annual Certification Data and Collection Report, or the ACR. So we have the CDFI certification application, and then we have the annual ACR. To become certified, an organization must submit the application to the CDFI Fund for review and approval. And an organization must demonstrate that it meets the following 7 tests. 1 is to be a legal entity. 2 is to have a primary mission of promoting community development. 3, you have to be a financing entity and have a predominance of your activity dedicated towards financing activities. You have to primarily serve 1 or more target markets, and we have 3 target markets. 1 is low-income target population, investment area, and other target populations. You have to provide development services in conjunction with the financing activity. You have to maintain accountability to the defined target markets. If you're serving 1 or more of those target markets, you must have accountability to 1 or more of those target markets. And you must also be a non-government entity and not under any control of a government entity. Tribal governments are excluded from that. And so in order to ensure that the network of certified CDFIs are actually meeting all of those tests, and to make sure that we are in line with how the industry is evolving, we have spent a long time changing the certification policy. And the reason for this is, over the past 2 decades, CDFIs have evolved in scope, scale, and sophistication. The number of certified CDFIs has grown from 196 in 1997 to nearly 1,400 today. The assets of all certified CDFIs now total almost $160 billion. We have a combination of regulated financial institutions, loan funds, and venture capital funds that make up certified CDFIs. And we're also finding more and more, particularly as we come out of the pandemic, that certified CDFIs and that certification is a qualifier for other federal, state, and local government and private sector programs and benefits. And as I mentioned, in terms of keeping up with the industry, CDFI financial products and financial services have expanded, as has the use of technology to increase market and reach. And so in developing the revised CDFI certification application, we wanted to maintain 5 policy objectives. First is to protect the CDFI brand. The CDFI certification has developed as a good housekeeping stamp of approval that this group is acting and providing products and services that would be in line with what a CDFI is, and so there's a brand associated with being certified. We also wanted to support the growth and the reach of CDFIs, especially as it relates to the ability to innovate and take advantage of new technology. We wanted to continue to foster diversity of CDFI types and activities and geographies. Fourth, we wanted to minimize administrative burden on CDFIs while improving data quality and collection methods. And last, we wanted to promote efficiency for CDFI fund staff in rendering CDFI certification determinations. And if you've reviewed our materials, you'll see that there's a lot more guidance and a lot more transparency on what we're looking for and how we're evaluating that. So I'll review a little bit of how we got here. The CDFI certification policies have not been revised since 1994. In 2016, the CDFI Fund began a review process to ensure that the policies were responsive to the evolving nature of CDFIs and that they sufficiently protected government resources. The first step was to do a request for information, and we disseminated that in 2017 and gathered input on the CDFI certification policies and procedures. Building off of that RFI, as well as some focus groups and town halls, in May of 2020, the CDFI Fund released for public comment a proposed update to the certification application. At that time in 2020, we received 55 unique comment letters in response to the request. But they were substantive letters, and so we took some time to revise the application again and came out in November of 2022 with further revisions to the proposed application. And the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, also solicited a second round of public comments. To this request for comments, we received over 270 letters, so quite an increase from 2020 to 2022. Where we are now is that we are reviewing all 270 comment letters. And what I'll do over the next couple minutes is go through the application section by section at a very, very high level to indicate what some of our proposed changes are. I'm not able to comment at this time on what our responses are to those proposed comments, as we're still working through those, but more will be coming out on that in the coming months, so the industry will have an ability to see and understand where we landed in terms of a final application. So for the first application section, we had basic information, and we didn't make a lot of substantive changes to that. What we are requiring is that non-regulated entities will be required to submit affiliate information. As of now, regulated entities must provide affiliate information. And then we also added some questions to collect demographic data on board members and executive staff. This is a new change because as of now we don't collect that information. The first test that I mentioned a couple minutes ago, the legal entity, we don't have any substantive changes for that section. The primary mission, which is the second test, is where we have quite a few proposed revisions. And while the core of the primary mission test, which is for organizations to demonstrate that they have a primary mission of community economic development hasn't changed. What we're requesting as evidence of that mission has changed quite a bit from the current application. You must have a community development mission in place for at least 6 months, and you must demonstrate that through a board-approved community development strategic plan also being in place. You also have to have board documents, organizational articles of incorporation that mention that you have a community development mission. You must demonstrate that products and services do not harm consumers and reflect responsible financing practices. And in that instance, we have added a series of questions, some yes, no, some provide areas for more clarification, but really looking at the CDFIs or the organization that's applying for CDFI certification to demonstrate that they have responsible financing practices that truly benefits underserved or distressed people and communities. And so there's some bright line questions. There's questions about interest rates. There are questions about loan terms. And in some cases, some of the questions have been phrased as yes, no, and that is a yes. In some places, we have suggested that is a disqualifier for certification. But in other places, we allow applicants to describe those products and services and the terms associated with those. And so that's one area where we received a lot of comments, and we are currently reviewing our responsible financing practice questions. We're also requiring parent entities of CDFI applicants and affiliates that provide financial products and or financial services to demonstrate that it also has a primary mission that is consistent with that of the applicant. And one big change that we've heard quite a bit about is that we have removed the inclusion of NCUA's low-income designation as acceptable documentation and evidence of a primary mission of community development. The next test that I'll talk a little bit about is the financing entity test. And for regulated institutions, this test does not apply. For non-regulated institutions, you must have a minimum of 12 months of activity. We have what we call spin-off entities, where if an institution is creating a new organization that wishes to be certified, that those entities can use assets that are transferred from that from the larger institution to meet the test. And then loans purchased from non-certified CDFIs can now count as an eligible financial product. In the target market test, which is another area where we've received a lot of comments, we have removed the geographic boundaries and mapping requirements for most target markets. And this ties directly with what I mentioned at the top of this discussion about how we're trying to accommodate and support the CDFI network as it grows and evolves and moves to deliver products and services across the country. We've also made some changes to what we call the customized investment areas. And the customized investment areas in counties that consist of qualified and non-qualified census tracts, we're now requiring that at least 85% of the financing activity in those tracts be directed within the qualified census tracts or of that investment area or county. And that can count toward meeting the target market test. In addition, we are adding persons with a disability as a pre-qualified target population, other target population. And for regulated institutions that are able to meet target market test, if 60% of their financial services, depository accounts, and 50% of their financial products are directed to a target market. So this change is something that we propose. We received some comments on this as well, and we're taking a look at this as part of the target market section. And then finally, financial products, and if you're also delivering financial services activity, that could be measured for the new certification application over the last recently completed 12-month period. This is a new requirement. The next section where we heard quite a bit from the industry was around accountability. And we removed the geographic criteria to conform with the removal of the geographic boundaries in most of the target markets. We set clear board member percentage standards and added advisory board options This was important for us in terms of being able to evaluate this section as well as provide more transparency and clarity to the industry. We also allowed applicants that rely on an advisory board to maintain accountability. They must maintain an organizational accountability policy. And this is to ensure that the advisory board has a role to influence and be part of the decision-making body of the governing board for the applicant. We've eliminated the existing option of utilizing an applicant board member's participation on the governing board of another advisory board of an unconnected organization as a means of demonstrating accountability to a target market. And we are allowing family members of a person with disability to serve as an accountable board member. A lot of the comments we received, as I mentioned, were on accountability, so we're taking a lot of time to look at that feedback as well. For development services, we didn't make any substantive changes, but I will say here that most of what's in the proposed application is just a clarification or more transparency on the process that we have been using, and so we are taking a look at how that's communicated to make sure that applicants understand what counts and what does not count toward development services. For the non-governmental entity, we didn't have any substantive changes. And then for the Native CDFI designation, which is not one of the 7 tests, but we do confer Native CDFI designation on groups that serve Native communities, we are now adding that the Native CDFI designation for those applicants, they must demonstrate accountability to the Native community. And the applicants must also direct at least 50% of their financial products and services to one or more Native communities during the most recently completed full fiscal year. And these two are 2 new requirements for the Native CDFI designation. So for next steps, we are following through with our commitment to review every single comment and to make any necessary revisions to the application before implementing the round. To take a step back, on October 1st of 2022, we instituted a blackout period on the submission of new CDFI certification applications until the new applications implement. And because we received so many comments, we had intended to open or to implement the new application in April of this year, but we are putting that on hold while we review the comments. And so we'll have an updated timeline that we will come out with shortly, as well as more clarity and information on when the implementation will take place. I should mention that when the application round does open later this year, the main purpose for opening is to allow new organizations who have never received certification to be able to apply. But a grace period will be provided for all existing CDFIs to come into compliance, and we will communicate more about that. I'll also note here that while CDFIs will maintain their certification status until they get through the new recertification process, there is still annual ACR, the annual certification report, and other required reports that are still required while you are certified CDFI. But as I mentioned, we're going to provide a more definitive sense of our revised timeline after we've conducted a thorough review of all the comments from this most recent submission. So that was a pretty lengthy, but yet very high-level overview of where we are and some of the changes. I would like to open it up to see if there are any comments from the board members. While I can't get into where we are in decisions on specific items, I did want to ask if I need to clarify anything, and this material will also be available to you after the board meeting. Okay. Seeing none, Marla, unless you see one or Bill, who's in the background, sees one, I will turn it back over to you. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Jody. I actually did have a question, but it's about this slide. If you wouldn't mind indulging me, Jody, is just this second bullet. I just want to make sure that I'm reading it right. I think the last, is it revising the version that was released for public comment in late 2022?
Yes. My apologies. It's
no worries. Yeah. Because I originally read that there was going to be something going on late in 2023, and I didn't want people to feel alarmed. So thank you for clarifying that, Jody, and thank you for these comments. And I just want folks to know that I've got some parting words for Jody as well, but I've saved them to the end of the meeting. So I didn't want people to think that I was, glossing over the amazing loss that we will be having with her departure. But I saved that for the end so that we would not be too tearful for the rest of the meeting. So the next order of business that we have is the election of the vice chair. So I would like to move to that. This past year, the CDFI Fund renewed the charter for this advisory board, and during that process, sought and gained approval to add a vice chair to the charter. And the vice chair shall act in place of the chairperson when absent or will assist with tasks as decided by the chairperson. As with the chair, the vice chair is elected by majority vote by the private citizen members on the board from among the private citizen members on the board. Sorry, I think that was just a typo. We emailed these members earlier this month and asked for self-nominations to be submitted by 12 noon on Tuesday, February 21st. Dave Glazer expressed interest, and therefore we would like to call for a vote. And so if all private citizen members of the board in favor of electing Dave Glazer as vice chair could please reply yay and raise your hand to indicate an affirmative vote, and keep your hand raised so that we can record the vote.
Yes.
Yay.
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 Bill, let me know when you've got everything you need.
We are good.
Great. So with the majority of the vote in the affirmative, we have a new advisory board vice chair. Congratulations, Dave. I look forward to working with you. And we will move on to the ending and closing business that we've got going on. So we've completed the items on the agenda for this meeting. Do any of the advisory board members have any closing business? Okay. Well, in closing, as promised, I'd like to say a few words about the recent news of Jody's departure from the CDFI Fund. So as we've discussed throughout this call, we recently learned that we will be losing the CDFI Fund's director, Jody Harris, who is moving on to lead the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation as their next president. This is after leading the CDFI Fund for the last 4 years, including through the pandemic. Her leadership has shepherded the unprecedented investments I mentioned in my opening that have moved and will continue to move capital into the communities that need it most. This is a big loss for the CDFI Fund and for the industry, and I wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to publicly thank her for her 15 years of service at Treasury and for her indelible impact leading the CDFI Fund through a historic moment in time. Jody, you will be missed. On behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your contributions, commitment, and care for our shared mission.
Thank you, Marla. And my last day isn't until April 28th, and I think people are realizing that. So I got a whole list of things that we're continuing to work on, and top of the list is certification. So we're going to get a lot done between now and the 28th of April.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think this is just our last meeting before you depart.
Yeah.
So we wanted to mark it.
So thank you, Marla.
Again, from the bottom of my heart and as well from the board, I'm sure I'm representing them and saying thank you so much for all that you've done for the industry. I think the pandemic years should count as double. So because I know you were working around the clock during that time. So greatly appreciate that from you and from your team. So if there is no further business, could I have a member of the board please move that we adjourn?
So move, Marla.
Was that Darren?
Yes, that was me.
Thank you. So Darren Williams moved to adjourn the meeting. May I ask for a second?
Second, Dave Glazer.
Dave Glazer, seconded. Thank you so much. I'd also like to thank the public who has joined us today. And I'd also like to offer my sincere thanks to our advisory board members for taking the time to meet today, for your willingness to undertake the work of our 2 new subcommittees, and for your service to the CDFI Fund. This meeting of the Community Development Advisory Board is now adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
That does conclude today's conference. We thank you for your participation. At this time, you may disconnect your lines.